Hello, folks, and welcome to Star Trek Comrades. This is a new show, um, and we're going to be talking about different Star Trek episode series in this show, and with a with an eye towards looking at relationships between some key characters and how it's reflected along a specific theme. So, in this first series that we're going to be doing, a series of 3 shows, we're going to be talking about how the different series of Star Trek have looked at artificial intelligence and maybe some of the dangers around there, and then how the key characters in a particular episode played against one another as far as dealing with that particular aspect of it. So anyway, I'm William Danger Newman. I've been a Star Trek fan since the original series aired in 1966, and I love all of the Star Trek series, but I'm particularly passionate about the live action series. And when I'm not watching Star Trek or adding to my collection of science fiction and fantasy and horror memorabilia, I do data networking for a living. So I'm going to hand it over to Jason to go ahead and introduce himself next.
Hey, I'm Jason. Thanks for having me on here, Danger. I am I just started a restaurant a little while ago. Before that, I worked in like film and television and lit stages, lighting director, and made things flash around and stuff like that. I've been a Star Trek fan since the beginning, and now I'm here with you and all you guys.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right. And let's turn it over to Roy. Roy, you want to let the folks know a little bit about yourself?
Hey, I'm Roy. I've been a Star Trek fan since I was a teenager, watching the original series during the dark days of what I call the Star Trek vacuum, when there was no Star Trek other than in syndication.
Right.
And then it came along, and then I've watched every series since then. Some I like more than others, but at least we have Star Trek, and that right there is exactly just heaven. Because there's I know they're making a lot of shows, but you just can't get enough of Star Trek sometimes because they have this optimistic view of the future versus apocalyptic, which I'm kind of those are good movies too, but
right. You can thank J.J. Abrams that it's back, regardless of how you feel about the movies. As a Trekkie, first of all, they're great movies. I really like the movies. But as a Trekkie, I know how some Trekkies don't like them. But you can thank J.J. Abrams for
bringing it back.
Star Trek is coming back.
Yep, it'll always be there. All right.
Well, cool. So on this particular show, we're going to look at artificial intelligence and how it was dealt with in 2 of the series. One of the first series we're going to look at is the original series. And then we're going to turn it over to Jason, and he's going to tell us a little bit about an Enterprise episode called Oasis, where they dealt with artificial intelligence. So we'll show a little video intro, so kind of refresh your memory as to what that episode was about. And then we'll enter a little bit of discussion, and then we'll proceed into the next episode. So behind the scenes control room, if you're ready, go ahead and cue up Return of the Archons, which is a original series episode. In the Return of the Archons, the Enterprise investigates the disappearance of the USS Archon over Beta 3 a century earlier. A landing party beams down to find a civilization repressed by a ruler known as Landru, only to discover later it is actually an ancient computer built and programmed by a person named Landru some 6,000 years ago before he died. Unfortunately, in an effort to fulfill its programming, the AI enslaved all members of that society and anyone that visited in a thraldom of happiness, punctuated by periodic 12-hour festivals of debauchery and lawlessness. Eventually, Spock concludes that Beta 3 is a soulless society with no spirit and no spark. And Captain Kirk then concludes, therefore, that Landru's plug must be pulled. Spock reminds Kirk of their prime directive of non-interference, with Kirk responding that the prime directive applies only to a living, growing culture. So Captain Kirk, logic master extraordinaire, convinces the godlike AI it has harmed the people of Beta 3 by failing to allow them to reach their full potential. The AI, unable to refute Kirk's flawless assertion, destroys itself. The landing party returns to the ship, leaving behind a sociologist and a party of experts to help restore the planet's culture to human form. They report in as the Enterprise prepares to leave orbit, stating that they'd already had half a dozen domestic quarrels and 2 genuine knockdown drag-out fights. The planet is no longer perfect, but it is certainly human, with Kirk responding that the report is most promising. Spock then remarks on how often mankind has wished for a world as peaceful and secure as the one Landru provided, with the captain responding that luckily, mankind never got its wish. All right, so there you have the recap. And I know you guys have seen it fairly recently, so you're kind of up on Landru. Now, it's kind of typical, and I think, Jason and Roy both, you guys, we've touched on this in some of our discussions about these AIs and how they're depicted, especially in the original series, as they're always this godlike thing that's not doing things, not allowing culture to develop in the right ways. And that's kind of what we're seeing in this episode. And I'm going to touch on this in a little bit, but actually I want to come back to this. There's kind of a subtext going on here that is not apparent initially when you're just watching the episode. So I want to come back to that. But Jason, let's go to you real quick. I know you watched the episode recently. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, okay, so my thoughts are this: like when we have things with AI, a lot of times what we talk about is how it may destroy us. But in like this episode, it's really about how is it going to care for us if it doesn't want to destroy us at all, if it wants to keep us alive. Sort of is, if that's its primary directive, will it take into account what it means to us to be alive, what it means to us to be human and be free. And obviously the Landru computer didn't really understand that concept. All it knew was to keep everybody safe and at peace, friend.
Right.
Peace to you, friend, and Roy.
Right.
So that's one of those problems that we've got to work around. I did a good job with relaying that, sort of like iRobot in a bit, but in a different way.
Right. All right, Roy, let's jump to you. What are your thoughts as you reflect back on this episode?
Well, the creator of the AI and Landru, his intentions were good. I mean, he really wanted to create this society to take care of these people. It's just, things kind of went awry. The machine, I guess, kind of broke down, and they just didn't have the means didn't justify the end, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
right.
it ended up being chaotic, and this whole crazy time that they would have.
Right.
It was kind of destructive, and the people just kept going along with it because that was their god.
Right.
And they didn't know any better, and they didn't even realize that it was a computer that was controlling it all, honestly.
Right.
So once they took the veil off, so to speak, and pulled the curtain away from the wizard, like Wizard of Oz, then
right.
It was time to destroy it, and throw the water on the Wicked Witch and
exactly
call it a day, like the Enterprise always does, and
right.
On to the next episode.
And in typical TOS fashion, we see Kirk using his superior power of logic to outthink the androids.
I don't know how many
episodes we saw that
logic.
Yep, and save the day again.
Right.
A lot.
Right.
A lot.
All right. Well, go ahead, Jason. Sorry.
I forgot what I was going to say now. Never mind.
Okay. All right. Well, so the thing that bothered me here is there's this subtext of violence being okay in the show. And so we see, the people are kind of in this mindless, fake, happy mode all the time, right? And I mentioned in the intro this thraldom of, happiness and bliss. And then every so often, and we don't really hear how often it is, but every so often there's what's called festival, right? And that is a 12-hour period of total lawlessness and debauchery. And the people can do pretty much anything they want to do. And so we see in the first, the opening act, and the landing party's beamed down, and they meet this guy on the street, and he says, "Oh, folks, you're from out of town?" Yeah, we are. And he calls over some woman that's walking down the street and says, "Well, I can't remember what her name was, but Emma, doesn't your daddy has rooms available for these folks to spend the night and enjoy festival, doesn't he?" And she says, "Oh yeah." And they meet her, and she says, "Yeah, my father's hotel's down at the end of the street. You can go down there." And right about that time, the clock strikes 6
The
p.m.
red hour.
Right?
Red hour.
And all of a sudden, the guy they're talking to throws off his hat, and everybody starts screaming and running rampant through the streets, and they're throwing chairs through windows and throwing bricks, and they're actually running around with these giant pieces of wood like clubs, and they're actually attacking people and knocking people senseless. And so the landing party takes off, and they run to this guy's hotel, and they go in and they shut the door, and you can hear all the screaming and stuff going on outside. And one of the guys says, "Well, what about that woman? She's out there in amongst all of this." And he says her name, and the guy who runs the hotel says, "Well, yeah, that's my daughter." "Well, don't you care she's out in this thing?" "Well, there's nothing I can do about it. She's just going to be out there." And we see the next morning, after the festival ends, she comes back in, and she is just distraught because it's implied that she was sexually abused, possibly raped during the festival, because there's that going on. We see guys picking up women, throwing them over their shoulder, and
I missed that.
Running down the street with them. And so there's that. And the interesting thing to me was that we seen that go on. And then, in fact, she was so distraught, I'm looking at my notes here, that Dr. McCoy had to take her in another room and administer a sedative to get her to relax. And yet later, when Kirk and Spock take on the Landru AI, they make no mention of the night of lawless debauchery, fighting, rioting, rape. Instead, they focus solely on Landru's failure to enable the planet's inhabitants to reach their full potential. That's the argument he uses to say, you're a bad AI. You're not doing these people any favor. Instead of saying, you're allowing these people to be injured. I mean, I imagine people had to be killed getting hit with giant wooden clubs like we see.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? And the rape that goes on and all this kind of stuff. They don't mention that at all. They just ignore it and talk about the fact that the planet's inhabitants didn't reach their full potential. And then later, back on the ship, Kirk gets a report from the sociologist they leave behind. The sociologist says, "Oh yeah, the planet's no longer perfect. It's back to normal. We've got a dozen domestic quarrels today and 2 knockdown dragouts." And Kirk says, "Well, that is reassuring. Great. Things are back to normal." Right. And then at the end, Spock himself makes a comment. He says, he remarks on how often mankind has wished for a world as peaceful and secure as the one Landru provided. What? I would not call people being beaten senseless with clubs, women being raped or sexually abused, rioting and destruction of property to be anywhere near paradise. And
I think
maybe
he likes the simplicity of it. I think he just likes how simple it is.
I suppose.
You know,
well,
Yeah.
maybe he figured that you know, we've all seen The Matrix, right? So maybe Landrew figured that that is part of our psychology.
That we have to have
These
violence, that we're a violent people, and we have to have that outlet.
you have to,
yep,
yeah,
yep.
we have to have
Okay.
the outlet every once in a while for us to have the happiness.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so maybe it was like built into the system, or the system developed that to make sure that that outlet was ascertained every once in a while.
See, that's a good
Just
question,
to
Jason.
give us
Is
peace.
that's a good question. Do you think if that would have been something that the actual human Landrew would have programmed into the computer, or do you think the computer just developed that because it had, Landrew died 6,000 years before the Enterprise crew gets there, so the
Right.
computers had 6,000 years to develop this society, right?
I think that probably the computer developed that after a while. Because maybe you had people that were fighting against the computer, number one.
Yeah.
But I mean, first of all, I've never gone along with that. I think I could be perfectly fine in life without ever hitting anybody over the head with a club.
Right.
I
Right.
think I could just live my whole life without doing that one time, and I'll be fine.
Yes, right.
And actually, the actual idea of doing it, and I don't think I would be okay with that.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So that whole philosophy, I don't think I really,
Yeah, and
dig into.
And Roy, what do you think? I mean, we all know that there are people in society that have violent tendencies, that enjoy fighting. You have that Brad Pitt
Definitely.
Fight Club movie, right? So there's people that enjoy that kind of stuff. But there's also a lot of people that just want to be left alone, and they don't want to be, mauled, beaten, bruised, battered, sexually abused.
Well. First of all,
I mean,
fighting is in a way, yes, it's violent. Fighting is a sport. It's a test of your reflexes, your wit, your endurance, your speed.
Sure. But can't you get that
but-
from like just athletics, like in the Olympics?
Sure, but
Yeah.
every athletics is different. I was a gymnast, and I think as a gymnast, I got things I could get from gymnastics that I can't get from any other sport.
Yeah, it was probably created as an outlet.
Yeah.
Honestly.
All right.
So I mean, but some hard decisions had to be made, and Landry just had to go.
I agree. All right.
Society wasn't going anywhere. So, anyways, I think we should time to move on.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, thank you. I encourage the folks out there to watch the episode again and take a look for that little subtext there and see if you agree with us. And if you do, post some comments and let us know what your thoughts are. All right. With that, we're going to hand it over to Jason here and control room. Let's go ahead and run Jason's video so we can get the intro on Oasis from Enterprise.
In the Star Trek Enterprise episode titled Oasis, the crew of the NX-01 go to a planet with a downed ship. They make scans of the ship and they find out that there are no life signs. So they figure it'd be a good idea to go down there and do some salvage. Find some parts, some resources, whatever. Soon after they get there, they realize that the no life sign thing was not true. There are actually 30 crew members down there who've been crashed on that ship for 3 years. And being the happy-go-lucky, helpful chaps that they are, the crew of the Enterprise offer to help the crew fix their ship. And for some reason, they're kind of reluctant. They kind of just don't want the Enterprise around. But then they do realize they do want them to fix this one important machine to them. It seems to run most of the vital systems on the ship. And they do need that fixed. So Trip doesn't even know really what this machine does. He's seen something like it, but doesn't really know what it does. And at the same time, Trip has been making Google eyes at one of the crew members. Her name is Liana. And Trip gets all the girls, so they have a nice little talk back and forth. He invites her up to the Enterprise. Her mother and father are upset about that. They are against it. And actually, her whole crew is against her going up to the ship. And we find out that the reason why they're against it is because they got a big secret. And the big secret is that they haven't been down there for 3 years. They've been down there for 20 years. And the bigger secret is that there's not 30 members down there. There's only 2. There's only 2 living people down there. The rest of them are artificial intelligent holograms. Actually, the 2 people that are living are Liana, the one that's liking Trip, and her father. So her father recreated the people that died on the ship when it crashed, and now they're the holograms, and they're just living throughout the ship, fixing things and just living life, really. Liana was like a child when it crashed. Now she's in her, looks like upper 20s or 30s, and she's basically lived her whole life down there on that ship with these holograms, and that's life. The problem is that her father wants that life to continue in that way. That's why they were trying to get the Enterprise crew out of there. And after a lot of talking, a lot of Star Trek phaser fire, they end up really, really talking about it and realizing that, Archer kind of convinces them that, hey, no matter what you want, man, your daughter doesn't need to live with a bunch of holograms for the rest of her life. You got to get her out of here. So Odo, her dad, agrees that, yeah, you know what, maybe you're right. So we'll accept some help, but me and my holograms are going to fix the ship as long as you give us the parts to do so. So the Enterprise gives them the stuff they need to fix the ship, and we leave the show with us assuming that they have what they need to fix the ship, and eventually they do leave for their home planet, instead of them living there for the rest of their life with holograms that aren't even real, which is kind of weird. All right. So that's Oasis. And one of the things that interested me in this episode was, a lot of things we're going to talk about AI as always, obviously the bad things that the AI does, but also we also have to think about how we use it. And, we started doing this already with video games as people just living in video game worlds. But this guy really didn't really see the harm in him having his daughter just grow up around people that weren't real. He created a safe haven for them. It was an oasis. Everything was great. So I guess the question would be, would something like that be okay to give someone, to let your children grow up or people grow up with artificial intelligence, with something that's not even real? Or do they need to grow up with actual human beings?
Yeah. Roy, you want to go ahead and take that?
Yeah, so it seems like there was a lot of debate going on. It's like, do we want to leave the Oasis, go back to our planet? Do we want to stay? I mean, obviously they did all that for her. Her father did that for her when she was a little girl. And that's the only life he knew. And he liked, just being alone with his daughter and these fake people, these hologramic people. So that was the big debate amongst the, the crew of Enterprise, and, the 2 in the Oasis was like, do you want to come with us? Do you want to stay here? It was that was the quandary of the episode, really, was what it come down to. Do you want to leave? Do you want to stay?
Yeah.
We can leave you here. We can give you the parts. I mean, obviously they ended up fixing the ship themselves and hopefully, going home.
Well, her father, Renee
Auberjois.
wanted to stay.
Odo.
I think she was, she was at first she didn't have a definite desire, but she was definitely curious. He was, basically sheltering her from it.
Well, she knew.
Let's just give a shout out to Annie Wershing, who plays Liana on the show, and she is the new board queen. Roy figured that out.
Very good, Roy. That's awesome.
Yeah, she's slated to be the board queen in Picard.
Nice.
Season 2.
Nice.
Lucky gal.
Yeah. Well, I, in my mind, as I think about this, I think this is a horrible disservice to his daughter to do this. I can understand his motivation. He wants to try to keep her in a controlled environment and keep her safe.
Mm-hmm.
But no matter how good of an engineer he is, in creating these holographic people to, entertain them, to repair the ship, to interact with them. There's no way he's going to be able to create enough people with enough different personalities to give her experience of reality and expose her to different people. I mean, we see all of the news articles today about the damage from the coronavirus isolation and keeping kids home and not allowing kids to interact with other kids their age in school, and what possible impact that might have to their development, their social development. And so I think that would be a horrible disservice to her. I mean, even if this guy was not an engineer, he was maybe a sociologist or a psychologist that was an expert in programming people and different personalities, I still don't think it's going to give this girl, who's now spent 20 years of her life, a wide exposure to the possibilities of the people and experiences she will face in the universe. I flash real quick on Discovery, the last season with Su'Kal and being in that holodeck surrounded by all those hollow teachers, and look at how stunted his growth was.
Right.
That's what I think.
Kind of
Yeah.
same thing. Not to mention, there's no babies, right?
True.
There's no babies. She can't make babies, so you're basically just saying, cut off your.
Yep. Sorry. Go ahead, Roy.
So, all right. So one thing I really got to mention, since we're sticking to the topic of Comrades, so there was a little bit of a tete-a-tete between T'Pol and what's his name?
Archer or Trip?
Tucker, the engineer, right? So she's basically saying, "Are you sure you want to fraternize with, with this girl? Didn't you get somebody pregnant before? Somebody's carrying your child."
Right.
So you can tell, even though she's a Vulcan, all right, that she has a little bit of jealousy. All right.
Right.
She
does.
You know what happens with them later. But she wants her some Tucker, so there's a little jealousy going on. So so she's a little bit miffed, even though she's a Vulcan and she can't really just have her emotions or whatever. She's jealous over this young 20-something.
I thought they did that pretty well, just with them overall. The whole, as long as they took the arc for them to do that.
Yeah, and he got a kiss at the end of it. Didn't get her pregnant.
I was kind of never sure in Enterprise if it was going to be her and Trip that got together ultimately, or
Trip,
her and Archer.
Well, they kind of threw you a bone and gave you both in a way,
they
because they had one episode with her and Archer when he had that dementia. He had the 30-day dementia or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah.
So the dynamic between those two, though, between Trip and T'Pol, it's really evident in there.
Yeah. That was a cool part of the episode for sure. I thought they handled that really well.
Right, and Archer trying to do the right thing. Yeah.
Well, I think we're just about out of time here, so I'll go ahead and throw it back to the listeners out there. We'd love to hear from you folks. If you are familiar with either of these episodes and you have some thoughts you'd like to share, or maybe some things that you think we missed that might be interesting to bring to light, go ahead and share that with us in the comments section.
Yeah, put it in the comments.
What's that? Yep, comments.
Put it in the comments
down below somewhere. And on that note, you guys have a great evening. Live long and prosper. And thank you to Roy and Jason for sharing this time with us. And we will catch you on the next installment of Section 31. Bye-bye.
Oh, Comrades.
Comrades.
All right. Start from the beginning.
Bye-bye.
Bye.